I had never heard of that before. So I went up and said, what's happening here? They said, we are trying to free Canada from the United States. I said, tell me more about that. They said, Canadian professors are taking over our university and corrupting students' minds. And I said, very, very interesting. I said, well, the worst ones must be professors of education, because they are corrupting not only the students, but the students who are going to be teachers and teach the other students. And the person said, yes, thank you for telling me that. But they had some bumper stickers that said, Yankee, go home. I bought a bunch of them. I'm a pragmatist. I bought a bunch of those and sent them to my father-in-law who lived in North Carolina. And he put them on all his trucks and everything else. So, pragmatists, we find many ways to use many things. So the type of humanism I'm going to talk about is a type of pragmatic humanism. Pragmatism deals with the pragmata. The pragmata is the stuff of life. The stuff of life that's all around you that you work with, that you can work to improve. So I'm going to focus on that perspective. I also focus on an educational perspective. I'm a professor of education, and I realize that different groups tend to ask different sorts of questions. Work with philosophers in the university, they're always asking why. Why? The geographers, they're always asking, what do geographers ask? How, where, that sort of thing. Historians, they ask when. The people in business, they ask how much. But the people in education ask a different question. We ask the question, so what? What difference does this make? So we always get the reality check as we work within education. So I'm going to come with that perspective. So what? I have to deal with that question all the time. I love doing, I love theory, but I constantly have to answer the question, so what? What does this say about the type of lives we want to live? If I had to define myself, I would define myself as a professor of educational living, because I want people to live educational lives. And I'll talk more about that as I focus on my key ideas. And I'll also be focusing on the concept of democracy. Anybody who works with John Dewey knows that democracy is a key concept. One of his major books is a book called Democracy and Education. And Dewey shows how democracy in an educational sense is a very... Dewey's point was this, that ultimately he liked democracy because it was the most educative form of governance. As an educator, I like to have people use educative approaches. So democracy in education is a key concept. Democracy in a Deweyan sense focuses on our shared life. It focuses on the realm not merely objective, not merely subjective, but what's called intersubjective. The world that we share, the world that we co-create, the world that we get meaning from. So the type of humanism I'll talk about is pragmatic, it's democratic, it's educational. But let me start with a simple idea. Humanism. In my article, and this is a point that I've taken to heart quite often, it seems to me, if I really look at my beliefs, I'm a humanist because I don't know how to get out of the human perspective. There could be something called death. There could be something called comas. We get out of the human perspective that way. But other than that, we're always in the human perspective. I hear people talking about great metaphysical things, but it seems to me they're still always talking from the human perspective. So the aspect of humanism that makes the most sense to me is that we're working from the human perspective. If I want to contrast a humanist, I would contrast it with the position of someone who's an otherworldist. They say, oh, you're a humanist, huh? Rather than me being on the defensive, I always say, are you an otherworldist? And I think the burden of the proof goes on the people who are the otherworldist. Let's take the other aspect. This is a group here that's dedicated to a notion of secular humanism, a particular type of humanism. Let's think about secular. Okay? Many ways to talk about that concept, but a simple way seems to me to look at the notion of secular and say, what's it contrasted with? If humanist is contrasted with being otherworldly, secular is being contrasted with being clerical. It says, are you a clerical person? Do you want the clerical group to run society? I'm not sure many people would want that. So our job in terms of secular humanism should be rather simple. Most people would have a difficult time saying that they are clerical otherworldists. If they're not clerical or otherworldlists, they must all be secular humanists, right? I don't think so. Okay, that's the simple. Why is it so difficult? Why is it so difficult? Well, try to go back into ideas as to why it might be so difficult. One thing that we're facing are beliefs that people get in life early and often, and often and often. And that belief centers around these ideas. Number one, Almighty God. Number two, made us in His image. Number three, gave us a strict, unambiguous set of rules or commandments. And number four, we will either be rewarded or punished according to how we follow those rules. That's powerful stuff. Let's look at the powerful side. We look at beliefs. I really work to try to understand other people's beliefs. You get this early, often, everybody around you is believing this, and you're told if you don't believe this, horrible things are going to happen to you. You will also be separated from your community. That's powerful stuff. So the first part, Almighty God. That is very, very powerful. You've got the whole power of the universe saying something. We're all kind of puny. Who do we think we are standing up against the whole power of the universe? Made us in His image? What does that do for human self-identity? My gosh, we must be really unique. We are like God. Again, very, very powerful concept. A clear set of rules? My gosh, finally, certainty. None of this wishy-washy stuff. We'd have certainty. Eternal reward or damnation? Pretty good motivation to try to do the right thing. What could be wrong with that? It's so powerful, why would we question it? Well, let's start unpacking it a little bit. Robert Nozick wrote a very powerful book called The Examined Life. And he took Socrates' statement, which is the unexamined life is not worth living. He said, I think that's a little too stern. But it's not, it loses a lot of value and meaning if you don't think seriously about life. Oh, Nozick also said something interesting. Philosophers, I think, at times can say interesting things. And Nozick's point was this: how do you know when you're in love? And his definition of knowing when you're in love, when you're not seeking to trade upward. I always thought that had a ring. I guess I'm the only one who thought it had. I thought it had a ring. But in terms of the exam, let's examine this. Let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, let's deal with the question of Almighty God. That is a real strong emphasis on the notion of power. And to a great extent, that is placing power over ethics. It's interesting in the book of Job, because in the Bible, basically what God says to Job is, where were you when I created the world? I get to call the shots. I don't have to play by your rules. It's interesting, I'm reading a fascinating book now called Moral Clarity by Susan Neiman. But she quotes Abraham in two ways. One where Abraham was willing to kill his son Isaac, as God said, but the other one was at Sodom and Gomorrah, where Abraham is negotiating with God. Listen, you said if I get 50 people, how about 40? Come on, can I have 40? Can I have 40? But the point was that Abraham is saying, God, you're really wrong on being so strict. So there's something in this in terms of our ethical reasoning, which is saying it's wrong in terms of ethics to think that it's only about power. And the point that Susan Neiman makes is, I think, a very interesting point. She says that ethics that needs religion is bad ethics. Religion, which says it has to be deeply connected with ethics, for ethics to work, is bad religion. But I'll leave that go. You might want to read the book. It's called Moral Clarity. But the point is, we can challenge the whole issue of power. And we say if it's just about power, ethically we become underdeveloped. So that gets questioned. Made us in His image. What's wrong with that? Very elevating. The negative side of that, it seems to be, is that we are disconnected from the rest of nature, from the rest of life. We gear ourselves in terms of what's on top, as opposed to what we came from. And our connection at a very, very basic level gets challenged. Third notion, is a, what was the third one? Go back to my imaginary PowerPoint. Okay? Almighty God made us in His image. Clear set of rules. Let's talk about that clear set of rules. What's the strength? The strength is certainty. We've got certainty. We know exactly how it is. You know what the weakness is? Certainty. You know exactly how it is. But the world isn't exactly how it is. The old thing, you never step in the same stream twice. Actually, you never step in the same stream once. Just by stepping into it, it's different as you do things. So the point is, no, the world seems much more complex than just say, this is certain. And anyway, even with the certainty, you need to be able to interpret the rule in the particular situation. So it's not quite so simple. Then how about reward, eternal rewards? How many people have read some Dante in their life?